Hello, everyone. Welcome to our design journal. This is design journal number 6, I believe. And looks like I got dropped into the screen a little earlier than I expected while I was waiting for the video to start. So if you saw me looking around confused for a few moments, that's what that was all about. But welcome to design journal all the time. It wouldn't be design journal without some sort of technical glitch along the way. So, hey, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what we've been working on over the last week, what's coming up, and just generally how things are going. Plus, I have a special guest this week, so we'll be coming to that in just a second. So let me start by talking about the things that have been going on. As you probably saw, we have the Trello board up now. That is up. I've been adding adventure or quests to that. We call them quests into that, the work that we need to get done. It's pretty basic stuff right now, right? We're not talking about anything too fancy. We're talking about emailing our consulting designers their first adventure. We're talking about updating the tome of requirements with all of your survey feedback, which was done, and creating our initial set of quest cards. So a lot of just sort of groundwork we need to do in order to get going with this project. It's a big project. There are a lot of moving parts, and we're starting from the very beginning. So you're seeing some of this stuff happening. Now, the good news is we did get our funds from Kickstarter. So that is now in the account. I'm creating a special savings account for that, as you may have seen if you've looked at the Trello page, where all that money is going to be placed. We'll pull it out as we need it to pay people as we're going along. The idea is that we made a promise from the start that we were keeping the Mechanical Muse funds separate from the funds for this project. The idea being none of this money is going to be going towards our operating costs or anything like that. It's all going to the designers, the lawyer, the folks who are participating in the creation of this project for you, of course, printing the books and things like that as well. The other thing that's coming, and it really is coming, is we have late pledging. So if you've got a friend who said, like, I totally missed it, the backer kit stuff is done and up. I need to get one last thing approved, but it's a beta system they have that'll literally allow people to pledge late. And this is going to be cool because that'll get us more designer hours. It'll get us art by Russell that we're going to be putting into the standard books. So there's a lot of cool stuff that can come out of that. And we've been working on that as well because that's really important. Now, the key thing that I wanted to share with you is that we have sent over to a group of our designers based on their responses to the surveys to a number of our designers a first quest. And that first quest has two parts. They're going to read the tome of requirements and offer us their feedback. Do the requirements make sense? What do they think about them? Do they see any pitfalls from their experience that make them think, yeah, you guys are in big trouble if you try to make this your goal? We've been there. Or this is great. Do this one. And here's our ideas for how to do it. The second thing they're going to be offering us is a set of thoughts and ideas on our first step of design. Where do we start? What is the first thing that we grab? We've had a lot of discussions about this in the Discord, but that first step is really important. And once we make it, I think things are going to go way faster than we even expect, because that's when it's going to get pretty exciting and there's going to be ideas just rolling out. So getting that feedback is going to be important. Now, what you might want to know is, do you get to see any of that? We absolutely will share with you the feedback we're getting from our designers. Now, the feedback they give us is raw, just stream of consciousness, ideas they've got that they want to share with us about these ideas. All of this stuff is very cool. And we don't want them to feel like they have to sit there and re-edit and everything. So we're not going to give you their raw feedback. But what we're going to do is we'll be able to say things like, well, it's interesting. DBJ was talking about this, and one of his suggestions was this. And we'll be able to give you that feedback, because part of what we want you to do is be able to learn from the experience that we're all getting doing this project. So I think that's going to be very cool. And we're going to have some of that coming up because we sent that out to the designers and the work is now underway. So very exciting stuff. I don't think I have too much more to mention to you right now. This coming week, I am waiting to hear back from our consulting designers. I now am sort of free from some of the things that were sort of keeping me down, and we're going to be on Discord a lot more discussing with folks. Now, again, I always forget to copy the Discord invite link when I start this, but let me go ahead and grab that. I'll copy it into the notes here, into the comments. Hang on, generate the link. There we go. All right. So it's now in the comments. Feel free to join us in conversation there, because it is looking like that's going to be our primary point of conversation. Although I'm also going to be doing a lot more chatting in the Facebook group as well. So depending on where your preference is, you can join either of those and join in on the fun of talking about all of this. So one last thing. I am working through all the feedback you guys gave me. You guys got a huge head start on me as we were going through the Kickstarter and even before it on the Facebook group. And there's a lot of great stuff that you guys have talked about. I am working my way through it, and it's taking me longer than I expected because there's way more of it than I expected, but it's awesome. So I can't wait to take some of that. I'm going to collate it, summarize it, and share that with you guys in an upcoming design journal so you can see some of the feedback that we got from all of you. And it's very cool stuff. Okay. That's my really quick news update. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to drop them into the notes there. If you have questions, ideas, thoughts, send them across and I'll answer them as we go. Now, our special guest is one of our consulting designers. You may have noticed I mentioned DBJ earlier. Well, welcome DBJ to our weekly design journal. Hey, DBJ, how's it going?
I'm doing all right. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, sure. We're happy to have you here. This is awesome. And DBJ, you guys may know, has his own YouTube channel, RPG with DBJ. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so definitely check that out. So, I was just giving everybody the lowdown. You probably heard me doing the fire hose news report of all the things that we're working on right now. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to any project like this. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this in things you've worked on in the past.
Yes. I've worked with N-World on Level Up Advanced 5th Edition. Specifically, I was with the consultant and writing group for Trials and Treasures, one of the 3 books that were written when they rewrote 5th Edition from the ground up.
Yeah.
I've also worked with Onyx Path Publishing. I also worked with Critical Hit Publishing and continue to be related with Critical Hit Publishing and produce the Cinematic Environs books for 5th edition, and versions of them are also on the Miskatonic repository for Call of Cthulhu with Critical Hit Publishing. So yes, I've done some work. I've hopefully written out my worst writing now. There's a thing where you have to write, it's like 10,000 words to get that terrible writing out of your system.
Right.
Nice.
Well, it's funny. The cinematic environments are one of the things that first off, a bunch of people are like, you got to talk to DBJ. DBJ is awesome. And so that's how I initially discovered you. And I started watching some of your videos and I started looking at your cinematic environments. I'm like, this is cool stuff. I am liking this, especially as you sort of started talking about different layers of ways to interact with those environments. And I mean, there was some very cool stuff there. I mean, what sort of drove the creation of those when you started digging into them?
Elevator pitch. I'm a huge fan of superhero role-playing games. Huge fan. I have my dog-eared version of DC Heroes and Face Rip in my man cave, and the people I gamed with, they pretty much like to trash and murder, kill all of the bad guys. So I had to look with ways to entertain them, and a lot of it was incidental environmental objectives. And eventually my friends would get involved and they'd come up with these laundry lists of things to happen. So it was saving people from burning buildings and bridges collapsing and things. And eventually the bad guys became secondary to the cool things they could do in the environment. And I realized that the environment could be a character unto itself, and it can be just as exciting if that atrophied muscle is able to expand and grow and exercise itself. So,
it's funny you mentioned that, because the way these sort of environments came about, because that's something that at one time I had pitched and written about 4 or 5 of them for the Hack Journal back when Hackmaster had the Hack Journal out. The journal went away before I could ever go anywhere with it. But it was exactly about that, of saying, like, what is a rich environment where it's more than just a spot in the woods where you beat up an owl bear? What if it's a log that goes over a crevasse, but it's got vines hanging on it? So if you do fall, there's a chance to grab it. And if you do hit the water, where do you get washed away from? So it's not just like a death trap, but it's this rich, alive environment. And, obviously I've got a soft spot in my heart for those sorts of things. I think they're very cool. And I hope we can come up with ways to sort of guide GMs with building their own environments in Cool Name.
Exactly. I hope, as one of the consultants on this project, I hope to be able to offer something easy to implement, especially
Mhm.
because we're going to make a basic system and an advanced system. So
Yeah.
I would like to have a few building blocks that for the basic system, and then be able to expand on that in the advanced system, um, basically to make um, the environment using the environment. We don't have a lot of language to describe what it is. It's a
Mhm.
very When you say environmental challenges or exploration, um, a lot of us can think very huge. Seeing the fellowship real tiny in the distance with those huge vast landscapes that we
Going
all
across the
love.
mountain, right, in
Exactly,
silhouette,
right.
right? That's
It
it.
all the way down to very specific, where if you were to take the environment out, the action would in most movies and television would be boring. But it's cool when you see people fighting on the thin skin of a zeppelin, or on a rickety rope bridge, or in a burning collapsing building, and think and the environment can make any boring action amazing, because using and abusing the environment is so cool. Look, take a look at any Jackie Chan movie, and you'll see that he uses the environment all the time, right? Jumping, rolling, flipping, hiding, and the environment can be very neutral. So the players and your NPCs and adversaries should be able to use and abuse the environment as well, especially in combat. And I
Mhm.
feel like there's because this muscle in ourselves in gaming can be a little bit atrophied, that the surrounding environment is like the volume stage from Disney, right? There's
Mhm.
projected screens, but we're not really interacting with it. And
Yeah.
I feel like the environment could be that third entity within the game that allows us to change the um, to change our objective. Usually, the objective is bad guy in front of us, heroes on one side, they both clash, one goes down, one's standing.
Yeah.
And with the environment, you can really change objectives. A flooding room, now the objective becomes: do you want to stay and fight, or do you want to get out of the flooding room? Um, Take that flooding room and add one more thing to it, maybe a locked cage. You know, uh, if one of your PCs is in that locked cage and they can't get out, the objective becomes: do I keep fighting, or do I unlock that cage and get my ally out of it? And you can, as you start to implement some of the little environmental things and make them simple at first, and then start to have them stack. I do have my own list of terminology lexicon to be able
Yeah.
to easily describe this back and forth, and I hope to be able to introduce this into Cool Name.
That'd be awesome. That'd be great because, and that's part of it is that what I hope we can do is provide a toolbox for GMs, not just samples that they can use, but a literal toolbox where they can say, how can I add this? And at the basic level, add maybe even if it's just one thing or two things that enrich that moment just this much, right? I mean, there are always nothing's more, it's fine to have a big fight. It's another thing fighting next to a lava pit or next to a well that someone could fall backwards into, or a rushing river where you get pinned against the cage on the other side. Or when you're talking about the flooding, it's great if the hero wants to escape, but what if the villain is willing to die there? Now you've got this challenging situation where, like, how do I get around this? And you force creative thinking that creates a much cooler story, I think, in the end.
Absolutely. And the underlying ignoring the specifics of the environment, what I really want to impress upon gamers is a tool that I think is underserved, and that's tension,
Hmm.
pressure, something to get people to keep moving, to eliminate analysis paralysis. That, in an example would be: in 3 rounds, you will drown. You need to that impresses upon the players and the game master, narrator, whatever, to do something, to act, to have limited resources, and those resources can be actions, it may be equipment, it may be spell slot, it could be anything. But those resources in our game, to use those and have to make the hard decision, where do I apply those resources?
Yeah.
And when I say resources, I don't mean physical things, but within the game we have limited amounts of dice,
Mhm.
actions, attributes, whatever the game may be. um Having that tool in our back pocket when we run the game, of to be able to place that in front of the players and say, listen, I understand you have something important to do and your action is facing the bad guy, but there's this alternate objective. And having alternate objectives, I think, makes things very, very memorable. Um, Getting across the great field with chained dragons blocking the way out. The objective is to get past those
Right.
dragons to get out. The objective may not be to eliminate the dragons, right? Um, Escaping a city, running across rooftops and things to get over the city wall. Maybe that's the objective, not fighting guards, because we know that there may be reinforcements, or they have troops coming, or there are wizards that are being summoned, or whatever the case may be. Just being able to add another layer of tension is a great
Mhm.
tool, and then expanding out from there.
So I'm going to put this up really quick. Brainstorm warning to everyone. This is always my warning that I'm about to talk about something, but I'm not saying this is what we're doing. This is just an idea that we've been discussing. One of the things that came up repeatedly in the discussions that folks were having that I thought was great was this idea about resources being more than just physical resources in a physical situation. So that the idea being that the moment where you burn your will, where you burn your energy to push forward, where you're burning through something other than just hit points or stamina or things like that, your spirit, in order to pull off something at the last minute. I just love this idea because it kind of creates this scenario where you get to the end and our characters really, do they want to keep going, or are they just so burned out by surviving that, by using up their will and their drive, that they're just like, I just want to go home, guys. This is I'm done. I'm not going to die. I just want to go home.
Yeah.
I thought it
Um,
was just a cool concept.
for my channel, I do a live stream 6 a.m. Monday through Friday, and it's like a interactive podcast. And I want to bring up something that Zero the Blade mentions here. It says one goal, multiple options. Um,
Hmm.
Absolutely, positively. So
Yeah.
the goal, the problem, the obstacle is one thing, but solving that particular situation should absolutely be in the hands of the players. So if someone has a great idea, they should absolutely be able to solve that goal. And
Hmm.
the goal may change based on the outcome of what's happening within the scene. So let's go with a classic rope bridge as an example. Player characters need to get from one side of rope bridge to the other. It's rickety. We know the dangers. There's always the proverbial wood slat that falls out of it to let you know how dangerous it is.
Hmm.
And it may take getting from one side to another. What are the capabilities of the players? Do they use that as a way to convince the enemy to get onto the bridge and then cut the lines? Do the players go across carefully one at a time? Do they all, get together in one big lump and try to run across or whatever? For me, I don't care what their decision is. The fact that they make a decision and let's see what happens. I think that's a great thing. So having one goal but multiple options, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's now you're gonna have to indulge me a little bit, but I do want to talk about this from a system perspective. Phase rip, which for folks who don't know what that stands for, that's the old system that was used by TSR for the Marvel Superheroes game and the advanced Marvel Superheroes game, which was my favorite, written by guys like Jeff Grubb and Stan and folks that you'll see on, if you're on the forums and social media, you see these guys all the time. I loved that system.
If I
We
may,
played. Yeah, go
if I
ahead.
may interrupt, phase rip is an acronym for fighting agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psyche. And it's just called face rip, and it just phase rip, but whatever. It's
Yeah.
it's just a fun little acronym, and it's just lasted
Well,
forever.
and it's the way that you can find the stuff that is more fan based today. Is if you look phase rip, you'll find it. You may not find it under Marvel because you'll find too much under Marvel, which is lovely in its own way, but it's not if you're just looking for the gaming stuff. But we played that again recently. It plays as well today as it did when I was young. It's one of my favorite systems of all time, and I always come back to it. It had a fascinating resolution system. because it wasn't the typical resolution system. I don't know if you want to talk about it all, or if you want,
No, go
just to
ahead.
talk about this, the whole. I'll find if you can talk about it for 1 second. Let me pull up the
Sure.
chart because I'm going to
So
show people the chart really quick.
s- so
So
the phase rip system, and mind you, this is a community pop culture thing. It was never officially called the phase rip system, but
yeah,
it used a percentile dice, and you had like red, yellow, and green areas. So when you roll the dice, you could it was the beginnings of the yes and no but kind of systems. The greater your role, the greater effect you had, and they your superpowers, your special abilities, some of them would have greater effects the greater your role was. And of course, one of the things I really loved about it, not too many people liked it, but instead of using numeric values, the numeric values had a word associated. So they had things like your attributes could be labeled good, excellent, remarkable, incredible, amazing. Yeah, there, there it is.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
we photocopied and laminated these sheets and passed them around with our friends. And one of the great things about them, as you could see these, how they are abbreviated, where you had it began at the beginning, it was like feeble, poor, typical, good, excellent, remarkable, incredible, amazing, monstrous, unearthly, and then it went into shift X, shift Y, shift Z, class 1000, all that good stuff.
And of course, the
And
Beyonder came along, so they have to have
beyond,
Beyond.
yes, exactly. And but the great thing was you could really, with just a word, find out like how strong is a character. Well, I have amazing strength. Oh well, this person has monstrous strength. That means they are a bit stronger. And it was it. I know I used the word amazing, but I love the system. And you could move up and down this chart based on the either the actions you took or the complications that were involved in the specific actions. So Spider-Man, with his amazing agility, could roll lower on the table if Spider-Man was entangled in something or had debris on top of him, or Magneto had him wrapped in iron chains or something like that.
Yeah, and I think what I love is you talked about the yes and yes but and all of that. I love the sort of concept that the better you roll, the more impactful the result, right? You're getting a stronger result than just hit or miss, right? There's hit or stun or slam. I mean, this is how you end up, punching guys through 3 buildings before they stop moving. And it's a very cool thing. So in terms of Cool Name RPG, it's a good example of how you can break free of the mold of your standard sort of roll against the target number and come up with something that's really different. And it was easy to play. It really wasn't difficult
Yeah,
to play at all, right? And that's what I loved about it.
yeah, it was a very easy system to pick up, and I hope the the designers for Cool Name are able to implement something like that, especially with the basic system,
Yeah,
because we and when I say we, I don't mean just the us as designers, but the
right.
entire gaming community. We're a brainy sort of folk, and we love to hack things, and we're giving this away for people to hack it. So
Mhm.
while the I understand some people may not be um I don't want to say there's a reluctance, but the basic system may feel like it's air quotes too basic on
Mhm.
purpose to very easily bring new players in, to easily describe what the mechanics are going to be, whatever they become. And then from there, when the advanced system comes out, yeah, from there we can absolutely make our branching trees and just go hog wild. So I think if we have a um, great basic mechanic and a great basic system, you could solve any problem. The rule of cool would be very easy to do as long as we have a basic mechanic. Roll these dice, add very simple modifiers to it, and you're done. As well as, I think this is I don't think this is in indie RPGs any longer. I think the yes
Mhm.
and no but, the failing forward, the consequences, I think that's in the mainstream now, whether we like it or
Mhm.
not. Ask anyone who's rolled a d20 and needed to roll over a 12. One person rolls a 13, one person rolls a 17. And
Mhm.
despite the fact the rules don't tell us, in our minds, we go, well, one person definitely has had a little bit more impact than the other. It's just a psychological desire in us to measure our successes and failures and how far we've gone. So honestly, I don't even think that's very it's very difficult thing to explain to even new players. Not that it needs to be in the basic system, but I think it's a normal lexicon today.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because understanding the audience, I mean, we are in an age where even the concept of a critical hit has become mainstream language, right? I mean, if people like, I've had my elderly aunts say, "Oh, they got a critical." I'm like, I've never even gotten you to play D&D. How are you saying that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is really something that I think that we're lucky to be in a time where that language is out there so we don't have to start from zero when we're explaining to new players.
Absolutely. And again, um, again, thank you for allowing me to be part of this design. I've been watching a little bit in the Discord and seeing the conversations which I love. I'm not so much concerned about what the mechanic will be.
Mhm.
My concern, or at least what I hope to include in this, is that using obstacles and environmental challenges is easy and something we can incorporate to allow the spotlight to become wider.
Mhm.
For me, if the only measure of success and failure are like hit points, I'm just using that as an example,
Right.
then your vector of challenge shrinks down to one. Whereas
Mhm.
if your vector of challenge is one where doing damage to your opponent is the only way to win, you're going to get people to hyper focus on that one way to solve the issue. But if challenges become, hey, I understand the biggest and baddest player can kill many bad guys, but that's not the objective. The objective is to escape upwards and out of the flooding cave, or to get out of the burning building, or to get across the accursed desert, you know,
Right.
then in that way, some at different periods of time throughout the game, various players can shine. Others may have to rely on their allies to help them out, and this allows the. If I wasn't doing role playing games, I'd be doing punditry on movies and television shows, and great writers are able to move that spotlight around when you have a large cast of characters. And while the weak, scared, weakling character at one point isn't good in a fight, they end up shining in other things. Maybe they're very smart, they can outthink an opponent or whatnot. So, and being able to use the environment to allow the intelligent or the creative character to to outwit their enemies and then use that to their benefit. I think I hope to be able to include that in this game design.
Right. And Zero the Blade was saying letting others have that moment. I think that's an important thing for the players themselves to always keep in mind, that it's important to remember that, give that person the chance to tell their piece of the story because it enriches the entire story for everyone,
Right. And
reinforcing that.
and Zero to Blade kind of mentions a little bit where he says if they have the skill, correct? There in game design, sometimes we do a value analysis. So some games have more skills than they're applicable within the game,
Mhm.
therefore making those skills less valuable than other particular skills in that game. And so when you have characters who have to spend points to or whatever when they design their character to say have crafting skills or survival skills, or um, oftentimes when the game hits the table, people will say, well, I could have purchased another combat skill instead of the social skill or the exploration skill because that value isn't equal. Now there are ways to modify that. Some skills can be more expensive than others, but during game design, that can be an issue. And we hear this in the grapevine where we say like, those are dump skills. You don't really want those because they're useless or whatever. And I am a proponent of saying, well, maybe we should have use of those things to allow those characters who pick those particular skills because they're telling us that's the character they want to play. That's the things they want to interact with. So if
Mhm.
a character is sneaky or can pick locks or has a tactical awareness of the environment, then I think they should be able to shine in that and have as equal an opportunity to affect the outcome of the game, whether
Right.
it's in combat or out of combat.
Yeah, and I think that, and but I wonder too, like one of the things about it is that how much of that has to be the character, right? Are there ways, like this is the thing that I keep thinking about, and I don't actually have the answer yet, but I want to think about, are there ways that we can let the players continue to be a vital part of the game, even if their character isn't, right? Even if their character is, they're like, quickly, wizard, you have very few hit points. Go hide behind the cart. We don't want you on the front line of the battle. And the guy's sitting there going, like, I don't know what to do with my wizard. Can they still find a way to keep them engaged? And I don't know if you've ever seen systems that do cool things that you've seen done along those lines, but I'd love to find those as we start our work on this.
Exactly. There have it depends on how meta of a narrative or a concept we want to include.
Hmm.
For example, in a superhero game that I was part of a design, it got dropped, but one of the ideas was that superheroes do things. Superheroes are always known for doing things that, while on the surface seems to negatively affect them, actually makes them better as a superhero. Let's
Hmm.
go with Spider-Man, Peter Parker. Peter Parker is always drawn to have to help out Aunt May. We
Hmm.
know this. This is part of the thing. Batman is always traumatized about Crime Alley. Okay,
Yes.
and Spider-Man having to when Spider-Man takes care of Aunt May, his actions as a superhero are better,
Hmm.
right? When the superhero saves lives or prevents the bridge from collapsing or prevents the nuclear meltdown, they do these things, and maybe there's a meta economy where when the character does a thing within their scope, then later on they are able to gather things together for the betterment of the group. And while the two may seem like they're not attached to each other, this can be a thing. For example, when uh, I'm going to use very generalized terminology here, so don't quote me on this, but Spider-Man's hit points may not necessarily be tied to his toughness, but he may lose a connection with Aunt May. So he's in a battle, it may affect the social aspect of his character. Maybe he eventually, Peter Parker has gotten colds and had the flu and had to fight bad guys. Aunt May has gotten sick and he didn't pick up her medication when he should have, and the two may coincide. So the social character may be extremely grateful at being social and then may gain a meta currency that character could then apply to their allies when in a battle if that specific character is not, air quotes, effective in battle,
Right.
and so on. And I'll pull Blades in the Dark as an example. Blades in the Dark, a neo-Victorian heist game, and they have a meta narrative and they create this gang, and as when they are better at doing the heists, they can share that as a group and make their gang better. So, and especially during downtime. So maybe there might be, as the designers come up with a mechanic, there may be some kind of meta expenditure or a cycle where, you know, social exploration, combat tends to be the big three.
Yeah.
There's fourth and fifth one out there that's been dangling around, but maybe they can spend one to affect another one and use that for the group. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's kind of where I see it.
I was hoping you'd remember the name of the one that I can't remember. I don't think it was like Hollow Earth Expedition, but there was a pulp game out a while ago, quite a while ago. And in it, you could play things like the nightclub singer. And you didn't really, in social situations, you were like this, very cool, suave, you knew what to do. But in combat, maybe not so much. After all, you're wearing a tuxedo all the time and they're about to run through the jungle. Well, during those social scenes, you built up points that you could then use to aid your party during the combat scenes. And it was just very cool because you had this chance to say, my character can do what they do best and not feel like it was a waste of effort or leaving everybody else out. And so there was this really cool, I've got it somewhere in the basement in the giant room of game books, and I'll have to find it. But it was just a great mechanic for that, and I'd love to see us discover something like that that we could leverage to allow people to play those characters the way they want to. Because I have a long history of playing completely useless characters and wasting my points on things that have no game value whatsoever. But I think I just want to be that character, right? And play
Well,
along.
well, also, um, depending on how simulationist versus narrative you get,
Yeah.
a lot of times the air quote useless character in combat, when we see it in novels and graphic novels and comic books and anime and all that kind of stuff, it tends to be that they may come across that way, but they end up being very proactive within the scene,
Yeah.
right? So, the closest I can get to this would be hackers in science fiction. Okay, so the hacker, not a gunman, no martial arts, but they run off to the side. Our main combatants start fighting each other. The hacker does a thing and causes something to collapse or fall down, or they take control of a giant robot, or they have drones fly in. So it's not that they are effective in doing a thing. It just may either take them time to ramp up to it, or they become very helpful to another ally in the game. They find ammo and or a gun and they throw it to their friend in the sci-fi mission, or they cut the straps in zero G. They make debris fall around the I don't know, the docking region, and then the PCs use it to escape or something. So I'm sure there's a way to do it. It just depends on how meta we'd like to get, and how much that is embraced by the people who like more of a simulationist thing, instead of pulling ourselves back out of the character to hand something over. But I mean,
You
we
know,
see it in Dungeons and Dragons. The Bard is a perfect example of a character that has a meta expenditure to help other people. How it's described, it's kind of up to us. So,
yeah.
maybe it's just a flavor thing.
One of
Semantics.
the things that I was just thinking about is I think when something that comes up a lot in now we're just coming up with ideas again. It's look at us coming up with ideas. One of the things that I'm thinking about is in movies, right? Let's say Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Typically, Buffy draws the fight to her. They attack Buffy. Xander, he might still have to protect himself, but he's not going to draw the brunt of the attack. They don't do the logical thing, which is to take out the weakest characters first and whittle Buffy down in that fashion, which is what in gaming we'll see characters do sometimes. But what's interesting though is that it's almost like you have to have this quality that attracts trouble in certain situations based on your strengths, so that you have the combat character attracts trouble in combat. The social character attracts trouble in social situations, so that in the social situation, you don't have the barbarian taking point, right? That could be funny. You could have something like that happen if you wanted to, but the point is that that social character is going to get the brunt of it in that situation. It seems like that's something you could potentially mechanize, right? Come up with a system for and build into a game.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. And there's um sorry to bring up Blades in the Dark again. It's just a well-designed game.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Yeah.
Right. But it has like a stress and heat mechanic in it. Although it sounds negative, what I love about that mechanic is that um uh, the stress and heat mechanic is, as characters fail, it's like a countdown to understand what's going to happen when failure does happen. So in Blades in the Dark, you draw heat whenever you commit crimes. You go on these heists, you draw heat, and everyone knows above board, when you draw heat, you're going to get captured and arrested. So we know
Mhm.
that at the end of it, but we also have the countdown to when it happens. And I think a lot of times in our media, when we see the characters who are not very combat focused, they are helping to keep their allies in the fight by keeping that heat, that stress um countdown as high as possible. Because if they weren't there, our heroes would be overwhelmed. But if they are
Right.
there, they are they're causing trouble in the background. right? They're running away
Right.
from the crunchy, nameless minions, but they're actually drawing some of those minions away so that the other party can go in and shoot the door and take it down and get the MacGuffin out, things like that. So maybe there's a way to, this is a strange thing, but a way to for them to adjust the battlefield kind of because of their non-combatantness. Maybe they can do other things,
Yeah,
drawing
and that's kinda
minions.
where I'm thinking if the heat's being drawn off them, that's why folks like Xander can go do stuff
Yes,
because
yes,
they don't target Xander right away because Xander doesn't look like a threat, right?
yeah, yeah.
And for folks who don't know, this is Blades in the Dark, right? John Harper, very cool system. So just like to show it to folks in case they want to go, wait, what's that? Where do I pick it up? So just showing that off there.
I'm agreeing in the chat. So, side note,
Yeah.
Joseph Keenan, we're on the same page. We're brothers from different mothers, right? And we just vibe with each other, and I
Uh-huh.
exactly hear what he's saying. And Zero the Blade 2 is like feeding into that. It's talking about like giving more time or distractions, like a mechanic on a starship. There's usually like in the background we see many of our main characters doing things that narratively sometimes may not even kind of make sense, but we're like, oh, but that's adding to the story. The Expanse, one of the greatest television shows, in my personal opinion. But in the Expanse, they do a lot of that where they're science fiction does this a lot, where they're jamming signals and they are maneuvering and they're screaming at the nameless crew to keep moving and fixing things, and someone needs to get down to deck 17 to fix a problem or something, and they're all adding to the survival of the group. They're giving more time to the group to allow them to, I almost would dare say they're adding to like a group hit point total, because if they weren't there, that total would be smaller, kind of. And I wouldn't
Hmm.
call it hit points. I'm
No, no, I hear
no,
what you're
no, no.
saying though, right? Like the group succeeds or fails. It's not really about one person, each as individuals and their level of success. I think that's a great thing to think about is, maybe there's a place for that and we can find a way because that's one of the things that I think is it's always a cool part of a story if well, in my stories I always think it's cool in our games when somebody dies, right? It's usually a cool moment, it's usually a cool story. And yet it's really about everybody moving together as one to pull off the goal. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Just with, I guess, I guess I fall into the line of, but again, I don't. It's not really what mechanic is used, but I love a mechanic that has space, space for jazz music, space
Yeah.
for things to happen that are cool and exciting and can fit into the middle gaps when we roll the dice. So between the dice rolls, I love the idea of random-ish things happening that while we the players understand what's happening, the characters themselves are in panic mode and they are, they don't know what's happening, they don't know, the we've seen this. I'm going to give you a thing that happens plenty of times. A character has zero skill in doing something. They go to something mechanical, they don't know what to do, they hit random things and something good happens. Right? Now, as a player, we may be using points or dice or affecting a modifier to make a thing happen. The character themselves, they don't know. They went and they were flabbergasted. They poured hot coffee over the electronic keyboard, and all of a sudden the
Yeah.
thing happened. And I
Sparks
feel
shoot
like,
out of the keyboard and it breaks the computer, but whatever, it worked.
yes. How many times have doors been opened and or closed by shooting at it? What do we do? And I know we're talking about science fiction and this is fantasy, but the same things apply, right?
Yeah.
Trying to stop an ancient ritual, and someone goes, do we burn the book? Do we rip it up? What do we do? And someone's like, well, let's blow out the candles. No one knows. The characters don't know, but the players do. The players, have the meta currency maybe to affect the outcome of a thing. And so I could see some advice given in the game. I'm stealing a little bit of this advice from a game called Feng Shui, which is
Mhm.
about Hong Kong action. And I've held this advice to me that was within the book, and they basically said, um, if the outcome is simple, you want a simple outcome. I want to hit bad guy. I want to move through door. I want to go from one side of the room to the other. Your description of how you do it can be as exciting as you want it to be. So
Mhm.
hitting a bad guy can be, I go up to him and punch him in the face, or you could go all Jackie Chan on him and jump into a shopping cart, open up the freezer door, hit him with some ice cubes, get him to stick his foot in a mop bucket or something like that, and then break a broom handle over his head. And all of that is explained because all you wanted to do is hit bad guy. And I think maybe if there's some advice, it's some kind of like wording involved in the game that guides us towards a little bit more action and cool name, it's kind of cool action kind of goes with it.
Right.
Um, we could play with that a little bit. I would hope that the individuals who are going to design the mechanics leave us space to do that, because that's where I feel like I could fit in and then kind of put in my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to say one thing really quick. This is Charles. I'm going to get to your comment in just a second because I don't want to completely jump the other direction just yet. But one thing I did want to mention that it sounds one of the things I liked. I saw they sort of hinted at this in the Cubicle 7 Doctor Who game, and one of the things I always liked is using the wrong skill for the action. Wrong being in other games you're using the wrong skill, but in this game you're not, in the idea being that if you want to attack someone, you don't necessarily use your attack roll. Maybe you use your mechanics roll. Maybe you use your some sort of stealth, something other than that base attack roll. And the key thing is that most games don't come out and say that's okay, right? They don't make it clear, or they even say, yeah, but this is what you use for that. I'd love to see, in order to accomplish some of the things we're talking about, that sort of flexibility spelled out, and where you get those moments where suddenly the mechanic, like someone brought up, I guess it was Joseph brought up the mechanic on a starship. In the fight scene, they don't have to use brawling; they can use what they're good at and use that to affect the game directly, not just indirectly, not just to help the other characters potentially, but literally to fight against the enemy, because they like go over and like pull the right wire out of the motorcycle and it takes off by itself and crashes into the enemies. That's their attack roll. And I think seeing things like that, there's some very cool stuff that you could do.
I agree. There, World of Darkness
Mm-hmm.
uh, hit against that baseline in a sense of, you can take an attribute and a skill, any attribute combined with any skill to achieve a goal. And
Mm-hmm.
if you can justify its use, then it works in the game and it doesn't break it at all. So
Right.
you can use strange attributes and skills together. Like, I want to use my endurance plus my computer programming skill. Why? Because I'm going to be on the computer for a long time. Like you said,
Right.
I can use my charm skill plus my, I don't know, gun skill, because I want to there's a price. I'm dealing with gun runners and I want to get the price down below. And it's like, oh, okay, but you if you can justify it, it's workable. But
Yeah.
going back to Blades in the Dark, they get around this by having a flashback mechanic. So um, if I can explain this to you, you could come across a guard at a gate, and you need to get past the guard at the gate. PCs are heavily armed, guards standing there with their halberds and their pole arms, and it's clearly the guards see you, you see them, and they are absolutely there to stop you. There is no explanation. Normally, the silly part of that would be, I make a charisma roll and just convince them to let me through, and they just ignore us. Well,
Yeah.
yes, but no, it kind of breaks the fiction, right?
Yeah.
But Blaze in the Dark has a flashback mechanic. Hey, I go to the guard. Now, listen, in the game, it's exactly a charisma roll, right? Persuasion. But instead, they say, no, 3 days hence, I spoke to this guard to allow me to go through, allow me to make a roll, right? You make the charisma check. If you win, you are successful. Then the guard looks at you and tells his buddy, let's go off to the side, and they ignore you and you walk through the gate, right? Because
Right.
3 days hence, you convince them. What if you fail that roll? Well, you go up and the PC now knows we need to turn aside because I talked to this guy and we can't bribe this individual at all. They're loyal to the barony or something, right? It's I just sorry guys, I just made this worse. Let's go to the east or something, right? So they got around that through a flashback mechanic, but also I love what you're saying about using different skills to achieve the same outcome
Mhm.
because then in that way some of the characters who air quotes aren't combatants might be able to have a greater effect in the combat, and that could be modified by how important is the how important is the challenge. If the challenge is
Right.
like minion level, yeah, go for it, come up with something crazy and do it. Maybe it starts to pyramid itself, starts to funnel where you may not have that many options, or it may
Mhm.
become you may have to expend some of your resources to make those options available to various player characters and stuff. So I
Yeah.
would love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yes, what Charles Allen is talking about, and this is something that's actually more common than we think it is.
Mhm.
And in fifth edition, they call it um, passive skill use. But in games, it's basically, and this advice keeps coming around seasonally. It's like, don't bother having a role for a thing if it's not dramatic for the failure, right? Or in
Mhm.
other words, let's not roll, but maybe there's another cost to it. Usually it's something related to being terse, time, energy, resources, some kind of social thing or something that's economic, right? Where you don't need to roll, but it may take you an hour to do it, right? You don't need to roll to achieve a thing because guess what? Your character's already good at that thing, you know. Um, and randomly having training our players to constantly grab dice and start rolling them before we even know what the encounter is. I think we could reverse that. Hey, let's talk about what you want to achieve. And if it's look, if your character's, Spider-Man, do you really need to roll an acrobatics check to swing through the city? No, because there's
Right.
no tension, right? There's no danger. Spider-Man's doing backflips. He's standing on the side of moving cars. It doesn't matter. It's only when the tension happens that's usually when Spider-Man's Peter Parker part starts to, his heart starts to palpitate. He's like, I'm really worried about this, right?
Well,
Um,
I didn't mean to I meant to prep this rather than bring it up, but I brought it up. I mean, just Charles to give you some confidence, the Cool Name RPG encourages people not roll dice except in situations where it makes the game measurably more fun. And that is exactly what I'm saying is that there are things that your characters just know, right? Characters of a certain class know the if they ask the wizard, what spells can use these components for, maybe they roll if they're trying to find something weird, but if they look at it and go, oh, that's to cast a fireball spell. I know what that is because I can cast it. And I studied in school for a decade to learn how to do this. And I'm an expert in my field, right? Encourage people to say, look, you don't need to roll unless there's a really good, and again, unless it makes the game more fun, right? And I think that that's the key thing. So I'm going to go ahead. At this point, we've got about 6 minutes left. Thank you, everyone, for being on tonight. This has been great. I am thrilled, DBJ. Thank you for joining because it was so much fun to just sort of talk through these things. I hope that we're going to be able to do more of this as we go along. And I'm very excited about everything that's happening so far. So uh, we'll wrap things up for tonight. Make sure to check out DBJ's channel as well. It's very cool. I'll put into the description afterwards the link to it. And in the meantime, pardon me.
It's just easy to find. It's RPG with DBJ. I just call me DBJ. I'm DBJ on just about every platform you can find. I'm not very much into like social media. I got a full-time job. It's a lot of hours, but I will definitely positively communicate back and forth with you. I read everything. It may take me a few days, but I definitely see everything, and I uh, I love the community, and I've been energized by the community. I tend to fall positive with things too. So I love I get so much mind fuel from the people that participate on the channel that I have. And I want to bring that over here into Cool Name because listen, even as a designer, when it gets done, I want to do my own thing with it too.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so I want this to be as best as as it can. And I like being in the shadow of like, we've got some great designers on there. I'm just happy to be part of the team.
Yeah, it's very exciting. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, DBJ. If you can just stay on for a second after I drop you to the green room for a minute, I'll be right back with you. Thank you, everyone. It's been great. Again, keep your questions coming. Send them to us. Get onto the Discord. Join in the conversation. There'll be more coming next week. And in the meantime, keep gaming. We'll talk to you later.